So, the most common seam that you see in a lot of garments is a cord piping seam, a seam which has a cord piping. How does one create a cord piping? Probably you don't need to know, but still, I'm just going to give you a quick update on how to create a cord piping. Now, the foot of the machine is something I'm going to change into what we call a zipper foot. Right, your zipper foot which I've shown you is a single. Now I'm going to take a bias strip of fabric. This is my cord. This is how the cord is. Okay, this is how thick the cord is. You put your, so you fold your fabric in half, right, and put your cord in the ditch, into the fold. Push it as far out as you possibly can. Now I'm going to use the foot of the this particular foot to push my thread as far in as possible. And once I start stitching, I need to be able to lock it. Once I start stitching, I'm going to ensure that my thread is right inside. Okay, so what it does is it creates it creates a cord. Okay, now see how the cord looks. This is the cord which is inside. Can you see? I can pull it out. That's the cord, right? And this is how the cord which I'm going to put in looks. This part is hard and little bit high, and this part is flat. So I'm going to use a cord that I have made earlier. This is my cord inside a seam, right? So I want it to be inside the seam. The easiest way to do it is to simply line up the 3 raw edges together. The raw edge of one fabric, the raw edge of the cord, and the raw edge of your second fabric together. Now what do we want to see? We want to see the cord popping out from between the two, right? So this should be your right side. So we are going to be stitching on the wrong side. Okay, so now, as I said, the 3 raw edges together. Oops, sorry, I keep turning it around. Because it's about which side the foot is facing. So I really don't like it facing this way, so I'm just going to change it to the zipper foot from the other side, which is easier for me to stitch the cord. Sorry, I will explain the technicalities in case you're interested, but this is just easier for me to stitch. And that's just me personally. That's nothing to do with, the right technique or anything. So here we go. You put the 3 raw edges together, push your foot right up against the cord. If you keep pushing the cord, the machine will ensure that the foot will ensure that your machine just allows the ridge of the cord to be out, not the rest of the cord. So once I have stitched it, if you see, there's a piping. There's a cord popping out of it. Can you see this? Now, a lot of home textiles, home furnishings, cushion covers, floor cushions, lot of things use cord pipings, right? So this is a very, very common seam. It's a seam where a cord piping has been inserted. Okay, this is your cord piping. Now, this is one seam that we are done with. Now, I'm going to go back to my regular foot while finishing off the remaining seams. So yeah, so the next seam that we have is a lapped seam. What happens if you have a curve like this, okay, and you want to put something inside? Now, one way to stitch it is to hold the edges together, again the raw edges together and stitch. But when there's a curve, sometimes it's a little inaccurate, right? It turns out that one side stretches and one side doesn't. So at that time, you can use a lapped seam to do this effect. You just simply place your piece, the top piece, see, I folded in the raw edges. The raw edges are folded in, and you simply place that seam over your opening, right? Once you've placed it there, we're going to just pin it in place with a couple of pins to make sure it doesn't shift or stretch, right? And just stitch along the edge of this. Oops, we did that again. No. Okay. I wonder how many of you have a knowledge of stitching. Those of you who don't have any knowledge of stitching may find this a little bit hard to follow along, but I would say just pause the video, try doing them one at a time, and you might find that it's not as difficult as it looks. So right along the edge, okay, I'm just going to follow the thing along the edge. Again, I can't emphasize enough that you are not going to be doing this in a contrasting thread. You will be doing it in a thread which matches your fabric. And hopefully you guys will get some GC lessons, so should not be finding this too difficult. Okay, so like so, right? So this seam is now there. Now if you see the wrong side, the seam is the two raw edges together. Now the raw edges are there, the raw edge of the one fabric and the other, and this is a seam. Okay, so this is your seam. This is called a lapped seam. Why the word lapped comes from overlapped. So this is a lapped seam. And the last seam that we will do is a seam that was actually very, very common, which is a facing. A facing normally, in this case, I am going to face the neckline of this little top. Okay, so this is the neckline. If you can see it, can you see? This is the one side of your little top. Now, what I've done is I've cut out the fabric in the shape of the neckline, in exactly the same shape as your neckline. Okay, So this becomes what is called a shaped facing. Now, how do I stitch this? I attach it to the right side of the fabric, not the wrong side. This is the side which is the right side. I attach the two right sides together. This is the right side, this is the right side. I'm going to attach the two right sides together. And this seam, a shaped facing seam, is always a very narrow, not more than 1/4 inch seam most of the time. Okay, it's not a big seam, it's not a wide seam. I hope you guys can see that I'm just following along the edge. That's all I'm doing. So, like so, as you can see, I have just attached it all along the edge. Okay, now I turn this up and I do another stitch. This time the back, see, the raw side goes to the side of the facing, not to the side of the main fabric. The back, the raw edge is going towards the size of the facing, and at the very edge I'm going to do another stitch to make sure that the raw edges stay on the side of the facing. So the reason for this is to ensure that your facing doesn't make an appearance, show from the inside. The facing is meant to stay on the outside, so it stays. Now, once I have done that, my shape facing is ready, because all I'm going to do is now fold it, right? I'm going to fold it, and that's my shaped facing is ready. My neckline of this top has been completed, right? So if I show you see, I think you can see that the neckline is completed. The facing is on the inside. Now, if you choose, you can hem the facing edges. If you don't, it's fine. Some garments, some things leave the facing just like that, and sometimes they would just stitch it down to make sure it doesn't flap up. So this is called a shaped facing, and with this I'm going to leave the facings and seams for today, and if there are any further questions that you have, then we shall discuss it and talk about any other seams that you would like to know about.